The purpose of this video is to discuss how to debug errors in your code. When you're writing your code, it's very easy to make mistakes and use the incorrect syntax. So that's simply just using the incorrect rules of the language. So for instance, if you were writing an essay in English, you would maybe forget to put a full stop at the end of a sentence. In programming, that can be things like missing a semicolon, potentially using the wrong name, having a missing bracket, and various different other typing errors. These errors are generally easy to find because when you try and run your program, as we'll do here, you'll notice that the program won't run. You'll get a message to say that there was an error when it was trying to run the program, and at this point there isn't any point in continuing. So if we click on no and then we go and look at the error list down the bottom, I'm just going to pull this up so we can see it. So when you look at the error list, the error descriptions can unfortunately sometimes be quite cryptic to understand. It's the sort of thing that with practice you get more confident at reading errors. The thing that is important is that you can double click on the error and it will roughly take you to the area of code where there's a problem. So what you can see here is this error is saying that on this line it expected there to be a semicolon, so there's a semicolon missing. And helpfully it's actually underlined the exact place where that semicolon should go. As soon as I put it in, you'll notice that the error disappears. One thing to be aware of is that quite often errors are reported the line after the actual line where the error exists. So in the example I just showed you, we're lucky it picked up the error on the correct line, but just be aware sometimes not to focus solely on the line number that the error message is providing. It's always a good idea to have a wee look at the line above as well. So those kind of errors are not too difficult to fix because you're given warnings and the program doesn't run. So these are what we call build errors. The next type of error is a bit more complicated. So let's now run the program and see how it behaves. So when the program's running, we quite often end up in the situation where when we put in some values, so let's put in 4 and 3 and click on the button, we end up getting a result which we did not expect. So I've asked the calculator to calculate the sum of 4 plus 3, which as we all know should be 7. However, I'm getting the result 1. This is a good example of what we call a logic error. So a logic error means that there's no issue with your code in terms of your syntax, how you've written it. However, the instruction you've provided is the incorrect instruction. So what we need to do now is actually go through the code and try and find the logic that's incorrect, so the instruction that's got the mistake in it. And this can be quite a challenging thing to find. So what we can do is we can use one of the tools that comes free with Visual Studio called the debugger. The debugger allows us to step through the code a line at a time as it executes, watching each individual line of code execute one after the other. This allows us to then analyse the point at which it goes wrong and hopefully therefore determine what instructions got the issue. So the next step is to show you how to use the debugger. So I'm going to currently stop this application that's running. So either using the cross or you can use the red square when it's running. And I want to try and understand why my code is not working. So first of all, we narrow it down to the area of code or the block of code that's responsible for that piece of functionality. So I'm looking for the block of code where it does the actual sum calculation. So that's this block here, the BTM sum click. So in this block of code is where it does the actual calculation. In order to analyse the point at which it goes wrong, what I can do is I can put in a pause in the execution of the code. So I can actually ask Visual Studio to pause program execution at a particular point. This is technically referred to as a break point. So you're asking it to break the execution so that you can then step through each line one at a time and actually watch what's happening as the program runs. So because I know that this block of code is responsible for doing the calculation, I'm going to put a breakpoint in. To enter a breakpoint, we go to the grey bar, the left hand side of the numbers, the line numbers, and we just simply do a click. One click and you'll notice it adds a red dot, so that's a breakpoint. So we've now added a breakpoint into our code. If you accidentally add it in the wrong place, just click on the dot and it will disappear again. Okay, so we've added a breakpoint. What does this mean? Well, it means now when we run the program, it'll run all the way through the code until it gets to this point. So let's just do that just now. So we're running the code, and as you'd expect, it brings up the calculator, and we are going to put in our values. So let's just use the same values again, 4 and 3, and I'm going to click on the calculate. Now at this point, it doesn't give me a result. It jumps into my code and it pauses, and it shows me here are the set of instructions that run in order to do the calculation. So what we want to do is we want to pull up the stuff at the bottom, and this allows us to have a wee look at what's actually going on inside the code. So we can actually watch each instruction step by step. So to control the instructions, we've got a set of buttons that are now active along the top. So the first button allows us basically to continue on to the next statement. So if we want to just skip over and not debug, we can do that. This one allows us to step into the instruction and actually watch it running and see what happens. If there's any instructions embedded inside this, so it might use a bit of library code, then we can choose to actually step inside that actual bit of library code as well. If we end up that we step into something to analyse it, and we decide actually we don't want to do that, then we can click on the step out button, and that basically steps us back out of that bit of code and returns us to where we originally were. If you decide you don't want to analyse a bit of code, then you can just simply step over it. So it jumps over. It still executes that bit of code, but it doesn't go in and allow you to analyse the detail of what's going on behind the scenes. So normally I use step into so that I can actually go through each line of code. So you can see I'm clicking on it, and as I click on it, it's jumping down. What you'll notice is that the values down here are changing. So this gives you a list of what's actually going on inside your code. So what you'll see here is that the text for the text box, txt number 1, has got a value of 4. So we can see that value being picked out the text box. At the moment, num1 has the value 0, so it's not actually put the value into the variable. So once I click to run this instruction, so I'm going to click step into, it's now ran that full instruction. So now you'll see that num1 has been updated with the value 4. So it's taken the value out of the text box and put it into num1. You don't have to monitor all the values down here. Alternative way of looking at it is you can actually hover over the variables, and you'll also get to see what the values of them are. So if I hover over num1, you can see it tells me that num1 has the value 4. Same if I hover over the text box, txt number1.text, you can see it tells me it's got the value 4. And now notice here, you'll see that 4 is in quotes, because remember, everything that comes out of a text box is a string. So you can see that that's in quotes, and then we convert it to an integer, so the value that's actually inside num1 is just 4 without the quotes. So let's keep going. That all looks fine. I entered 4. The next one I entered is 3, so let's check if that worked. Yep, so it's picked up 3, and num2 has got the value 3, so it's got the correct values, so that's not the problem. So let's go to the next instruction where it does the calculation. So in the calculation, it's saying 4 take away 3, and I get the result 1. So that's where things have gone wrong. So if I look at this line, I would expect that result to be 7. So why is it not 7? Well, the two numbers are correct because the numbers are 4 and 3, which is exactly what I entered, but the operator is incorrect. I've accidentally typed in a minus instead of addition. So now I can see that that's where things are going wrong. It's actually doing a subtraction instead of an addition. If I want to continue finishing things off, I can either skip over and go back right to the beginning again, or I can keep going. So let's just keep going. So it's put the result into the text box. So you can see it's put the value of the result, which is 1, into the text box. Keep going, there's no errors, so it jumps over this block, and that's as we reach the end of the code. So now I know where things have went wrong by using the debugger. So the debugger is a very useful tool. It's great that you can put in essentially a big pause button, which then allows you to step through it one line at a time and watch how the values change. And that generally helps you identify very quickly where the problem is. So to update it now, if I want to fix it, all I need to do is change that to a plus. And if I want to run it again, I can run it and leave the debugger on. So let's do that. So let's still leave the debugger on just so I can check that that works. So again, it runs through the code. It presents me with the interface. I put in my two values, 4 and 3. Click on calculate. Again, it pauses, and I can use these buttons to step into each line. So I'm saying step into the code. So take the first one out of the text box. So again, if I hover over, yep, it successfully picked up the value 4. Take the next one out the text box. If I hover over, it successfully picked up the value 3. It's about to do the calculation. It's not done it yet, so you can see the result's still 0 because we've not actually executed this instruction. But if we want to have a wee quick check, it's got the right values. So num1 is 4 and num2 is 3. So it should go well. So let's step over and then go back, look at result, and this time we do have the value 7. So that's been the correct fix. So the debugger is a very good way of helping you find problems in your code. The other thing that it's very good for is actually learning code. So say for instance you're maybe a bit confused about the for loops or the while loops or the do while loops. If you've got a bit of code that you know works, that's got one of these loops in it, put a breakpoint at the start of the loop and then simply watch the program and step through it yourself, one step at a time. And that way it'll allow you, if it's a for loop, you can watch the counter changing each time round the loop. You can watch each iteration of the loop and you can see when the loop exits. And that might help quite a lot with your understanding. So the debugger is good both for finding errors and for helping you to understand the code, and in particular seeing how the code actually flows one step after the other.